Welcome to this discussion on the transformative power of adaptive learning in education. We'll be delving into the benefits of adaptive and personalised learning, offering practical insights into their implementation through real-life examples. We'll also explore how increased adoption of personalised learning tools can drive academic growth, engagement, and achievement for students, while also considering its impact on teaching methods and job satisfaction for educators. We'll also consider the broader question of whether adaptive and personalised learning could reshape the future of education and the potential challenges and ethical considerations it may bring in terms of equitable access. So great to have you guys all on the call today. I'm going to dive straight into the first question and open it up to everyone. How do you anticipate that the integration of adaptive learning methodologies will positively impact the teaching and learning experience in your individual subjects of maths and sciences? And then it'd be great to look at what specific ways do you see adaptive learning benefiting these subjects? So yeah, over to you guys. Who'd like to open it up with that one?
In adaptive learning, we are using some of the tools that we are nowadays is really easily available. I can say that, which was not the case a few years back. In mathematics, we are using the different platforms. For example, the Education Perfect we are using, where we are giving the task on the platform, looking after the data, collecting, and then accordingly the next lesson plans, looking after how the student is progressing. This is one of the tools which I found in comparison to the other tools is better one. Looking after the higher level of that, which I see is IXL. If someone has used before, it is more advanced form of the adaptive learning, I can say that, in which it automatically takes the data and gives the student the higher level. If the student is already going into progress, it gives the more challenging one the task, which is adaptive learning, which I understand is. And if the student is finding challenge with some of the tasks, then it suggests that, okay, go with these small tasks to come to that level, in which it will take a good amount of the time, which was before the teacher investing. Now, the technology is helping us as well as the student when they go back home. And more of the, which is personalized learning, the advanced stage of the personalized learning is going ahead into it. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks.
Do you find that when you've done something like that, you find the lesson changes for your following lesson from whatever you originally planned, or is it more that they're doing, you find with your students that's just ticking away in the background?
Yeah, it helps more of the personalized learning. If I say, yes, there is a role of the teachers is still there in giving them the guidance in the way that these are the areas that can be improved. If I say I have a student of 20 students in the class, it is a real thing that I cannot focus on each and every child in every lesson. And where I can do so many things means grouping is there, that I can involve with the students when I have the complete data of that the student is finding challenge at what area it is that.
It's quite an interesting challenge, actually, James, that I don't think when we discuss and talk about the technologies as a sort of content provider, it is quite an interesting challenge that I don't think I've necessarily heard anyone raise before. But how would you deal with that? The advantages and the fact that it's very personalized, but does it change your ability to long-term or even short-term lesson plan using the technology?
Yeah, so it helped me to continuously reflection, which everyone we talking about that, okay, we have to change our teaching styles according to the demand of the students and what is their actual needs. So it is always a challenging part when I'm looking back from my last around 20 years of in the education. It is always a challenging to look into, means I want to give my best to every student, but I am not able to give because I have the limited time of my 1 hour class. And after that, I have to move on to another student. Now, when at the end of the day, I already go with the 4 or 5 different classes and more than 100 students at the end of the day, I cannot remember what the requirement of each child for the next day. Now, on the teams, I have created this separate channel for each student. And when I'm looking for this adaptive learning, so somewhere means I can, at some point, I can go back and see where the child is finding the real challenge. So according to that, I can means go a step ahead for the personalized learning.
Yeah, I also think something that's important to remember is why we are using this in lessons. What do we want to get from it? Do we want to see where the kids are now? Do we want to test their prior knowledge? So I think if we use it for a specific goal, it is definitely a very, very helpful tool in constructing the next lessons, because we know where our kids are from the previous lesson and where we want them to be. So it provides us the necessary data and information to guide through the content to the desired outcomes for the student. So what I like to do with adaptive learning is I use it as an introduction to specific units to see where my students are at before. And then I also use it as a form of assessment after, so that they can see how they have improved during the time spent on the unit.
So would you be, I'm intrigued with the use of the technology and different ways that different teachers in different schools actually use the technology. Would you use it in lesson, or if you're using it to assess before and after, would you use it for outside of lesson work for the students?
If it's for preparation work, I would give that to them as self-study at home. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I do enhance the work that I'm doing in class with these questions, because it gives me the opportunity to feed back on them further than or deal with the questions that they got wrong using the technology. So and even after. So to me, it's before, after, and during. It depends on how I'm structuring the learning throughout the unit.
It's really interesting from my perspective. Sorry, were you going to jump in there, James? Sorry.
No, you go on. I'll come in.
I was only going to make the point that it's quite interesting, again, to hear the way that it's being used and the way that people will use it, because quite often, again, the people who will manufacture the technology or work on the technology, we tend to pigeonhole things that we develop as either in class or outside of class, and actually trying to work something that works for both, because it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. The use of the adaptive technology and the personalized learning can be both, and it's quite interesting to hear how that is being used.
It is a good tool for differentiated learning, when we have the different set of the students, their expectations, their levels are different, and giving them the task after introducing some lesson. We are talking about less in the reducing of the teacher talk is less in the classes. So there the role of this is very high when we are talking about differentiated instructions. We are looking for, as Alexander was talking about, the prior knowledge check. We need to have the assessment for learning focused. So this would be integrated into, at both the places, where means we have to look for some tasks they can flip learning, then be done with that. Differentiated instructions, AFLs, prior learning. So these are all the areas that,
we find we do a bit of both. Flip learning is a big part for us, because we get, we're on a prep school, senior school sort of model. So we get the students coming from year 8 from the prep school, but we also quite often get new students joining the school in year 9, but then we also get new students joining the school in year 10, and they could all come from very different school models, whether it's a British school model or an Asian local school model, which means we don't always know what their prior learning is. So it can be really useful at the beginning, kind of like Alex was saying, it's almost like baseline understanding of how well do they understand what I might think is a standard topic that's been taught in the previous year has not been taught in this school. But then also at the same time, when you get to the end of the topic, it could be a good revision tool in class, and then everyone's at a different stage and they can work at whatever level they're working at.
And I'm interested in Max's question. One of the things was how the technology will develop and how the use of the technology will develop, really, rather than how the technology. Mamahan said one of the things that was said earlier was how the basic sort of adaptive learning has developed, I think, fairly quickly into more personalised and more sort of self-run adaptive, whereas before it was personalised, but the teacher had to adapt it in the background, whereas now it's becoming more automated. I think my question or my interest is not necessarily in where we think it's going, but where we would like it to go. What do we want to get out of adaptive learning that will enhance the classroom even more for you guys?
I think something that's important in a classroom is to give the students agency about the curriculum and what they're learning. So when they can select the topic or which level they want to do, or so just to give them that agency on, this is what I want to learn, this is how I want to learn it, because everybody has different learning styles. So sometimes one student may work well with making notes. Another one is better with making a mind map. So I think that the different approaches to how students deal with knowledge and organizing and structuring their learning, I think that's something that could possibly become a little bit more differentiated in the future, if I can say it like that.
Do you think that do you think that using this sort of adaptive or highly personalized learning, do you think it helps the students understand their own learning style as well? I mean, I won't lie, I was probably in my 30s before I really realized I'm quite a visual learner, whereas other people are quite have different learning styles, and I wonder whether or not using this technology will help the students identify their own learning style, which may well also help their learning as well.
I think to some extent it does, because some of the questions are presented visually with illustrations, and where others are a little bit more, they could be hefty in words. So they know which questions they will struggle with before they even attempt a question, because they see, okay, this is a lot of words. I might be an EAL learner or an SEN learner, so I might struggle with this. That's just what I think. So I think to some extent it does, yes.
What I feel
going back to one of your you go first.
What I feel is that in the progress check that these tools are, and means for tracking, progress check for lesson planning and all those things, but at the overall, if we are looking for that, they need, yes, what the Rob is saying, they need the different type of the means understanding that how I am learning well into it. These tools, yes, they are coming into filling the gap, but how much gap they are going to fill? And still there is the need of the teachers, where they have to identify the human interpretation is required, how well the child can learn in which type of the thought process. So this is still, it is our need is still there for them, is the human interference here.
Yeah, I'd like to think that the adaptive technologies will enhance and help the teacher rather than replace the need for the teacher, in the same way that I hope that AI will enhance publishing rather than replace the need for it. But James, sorry, I think you were going to say something before.
I think one of the things that I've always found is, as well, then this why it could be useful if it's adaptive. I think our students are better at knowing their learning styles, but I think they will always lean towards whatever they find easy. And if I give my students, here's a range of questions in class, pick one, they will always pick the one that they probably find it easiest, if not try and dissuade them. But if therefore adaptive technology can actually take realize they're finding this easy, brings on a more challenging one, it kind of takes that easy option away out of it, and maybe pushes them out of their comfort zone a little bit more as well, which would be useful.
One of the things that we were working with quite a lot when sort of looking at technologies is the use of metacognition within it as well. And it's quite interesting you say, James, about the students always aiming towards the questions they find easy. And it's been an eye-opener for me to see the way that metacognition can actually show those students that actually what they find easy is not necessarily always what they get right. And identifying that it's been quite interesting.
I think we find, especially the sciences, the students, well, I'm especially with an A-level biology class the other day, and they find this one topic, they find it very easy to describe, they find it very easy to explain. It's about why is this population bigger than this one? It's all about competition. But what they find really difficult, and it always takes them by surprise when they go into the exam, it's not just do you understand it, it's can you apply it? And in the exam situation, that takes them off by guard, and it's actually, this is actually a very, very difficult topic. I understand the concept of it, but applying it is something I find difficult, and they don't notice that till they're kind of pushed and challenged with it.
And just sort of looking at the sort of those practical tools that you use within your own classrooms, Man, you mentioned a couple of tools you used there at the beginning. It'd be great if each of you could sort of describe some of the practical tools you use to make your learning journey more adaptive, more personalised for your students in the daily classroom. Alex, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah. One thing that I found very helpful is when I use this technology, feedback becomes much more apparent and easier, because you can say that they see the solution immediately, or if they struggle with it, you can see if you log in that they are struggling with this concept. So the feedback is much more personalized for each student, rather than getting an understanding of the whole class when you are teaching this. So that is the reason why I like to use it as prior knowledge and assessment, because you get a good idea of each student as well. So feedback is definitely, that's a win for me.
James, what about yourself?
Actually, something quite similar. For us, biology is so conceptual, and it's very easy for a student to give me a definition of what does this do, but have they actually understood it? But if I can see that they're constantly doing this over and over and over again, okay, maybe that's a concept students they can define, but they don't actually understand this. So when I go into a later topic, okay, I'm going to have to actually re-explain this, kind of go over it again. And actually, this is not a concept. If I just go straight into concept B and I haven't fully understood concept A, I'm going to have to do something different to make the links between it. It's I think it's also something like that as well. It's useful for helping students make links between different topics, which is something in biology they don't always notice, that this is actually connected to this, and therefore they're not just very insular topics. They are actually connected, and helping make those links between the connections between those topics is really good.
Man, any further tools that you use practically within the classroom to make it more adaptive?
Cognitive, these are we are using, but I can't say directly these are the adaptive learning. Cognitive we are using, MS we are using, Education Perfect we are using, which is something Education Perfect is sort of adaptive learning, I can say. And other than that, we are using Desmos we are using in the class for exploring, and Century Tech we started 2-3 years back, but there was some glitches and we have to keep it aside for some time. Explore Learning is also something interesting, which in the mathematics we are using here. IXL we are just recommending sometimes when the parents are asking for something extra for their child, or if a student is not coming up some conceptual understanding, is they are finding themselves at back. Another is in the primary we are using which for the World Maths Day we are using that, and details also they have worked out good in the last couple of years, and that website has also come up. Yeah, these are the tools we are using here.
Man, as a sort of someone who's sort of working as a maths lead, sort of outside necessarily, or looking after lots of different classrooms rather than being in the classroom on a day-to-day basis, do you find that within your schools there's a different reaction to or they use different tools, or there's a different reaction to the idea of adaptive learning? Or so is there a wide variety of different reactions to it, I guess.
Yeah, it's means as I started the group lead position last year, and I just looking after means I can say that the high school only at present. So in that means we are doing, I suggesting to the other means schools about the education perfect the benefits, which is in mathematics when I'm looking for some step working. In cognitive, they just enter the answers which they can get from their peers also. And in MyMS also is one of the platform where they have to answer. That is also, I couldn't much impressed by that. When I was looking for the education perfect, they have to write the steps, and after every step, it gives a red or means green like that, so that they can move on to the next steps. So it has helped them to develop their thinking, which is at the beginning means my colleagues, they are not understand that they are thinking it is the same like platform which we are using before. But then I show them that this way you can use it, you can assign the task, you can get the analysis of the data, and slowly and slowly means I can say that there means students also start understanding its value. Before there means some classes we started, but now it is I can say that it is working in a full-fledged where it is helping in both ways to the teachers as well as to the students. Another area means I can say that stakeholders, the parents are also somewhat happy with that to see that how my child is progressing, working. But yes, at the same time, there are sometimes the answer what they are entering into it, it is exactly same, but they are means maybe they are writing y equal to, and they put one more gap, and it is not accepting.
Right.
So they are the means. So they say that Mr. Singh, see the same answer. I say okay, send me the screenshot, and I have to share with the platform. But yes, good. You are showing me that these answers are going wrong and your scores are going less. But yes, I can understand, and then helps me their personal channels where I ask them, okay, take the screenshot and put it there. So I know that what you want is correct, but because of these glitches, technical glitches, this is your scores are going down, or means your thought process is right. Your means you're reaching to a level where you can judge the things are right or wrong. So that is the aim of our learning development goals. Your peer checking, there is an option of peer checking also in the Education Perfect. So that's also very nice inputs are there. Yeah.
I love the fact that you mentioned during, I won't mention any names, but you did mention during the conversation the fact that technology in its modern day has still not got over the age-old teacher's problem of students looking to their peers to give them the answer. The fact that you can still do that on technology is one of the I would hope that's one of the things that adaptive technology will actually, in the long run, really help you guys with sort of eliminating and knowing exactly that the student has put the answer in. The fact that I think that the good pieces of adaptive technology that I've seen will provide such a different learning journey for the students that they're not answering the same questions as their peers, even if they're doing it in class, and that, or they might answer them, but they'll answer them in a different order. And that just means it just throws a little bit of a spanner in the works of asking the person behind you to answer a question. But it is quite interesting. It's a bit of a failing, I think. Technology should have been able to help us prevent that, or at least identify when that was happening, in the same way that in the past you would have been able to identify that the student might have written it in a book in exactly the same handwriting in 5 different books. But yeah, it's quite interesting that that's still an issue.
I think one of the things we found, and it's not necessarily the adaptive side of it, but it's fact because it can be adaptive and therefore continuous. It's a really useful piece of data is how much time are they just spending outside of the classroom, looking, reading, practicing? Because that's, you give students some books, here's some worksheets, work through it, but you don't actually have that data of what they're actually doing. I've got an accelerated triple class, and I've told these students we have less time, we have some extra things. You are expected to be reading often and regularly to be able to keep on top of it. Traditionally, I never would have known how much reading are they actually doing, apart from maybe trying to guess from the answers they're giving in class. But when I've got some technology, some tools that actually gives me the hard data of this student has spent 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes on topics A, B, and C, you can actually get some hard data on. The reason you're not understanding this is you're not going over this. I can see exactly what you're doing. I can see what you've done. I know what you're doing outside the classroom, which, as you're mentioning, parents can see as well. If they can get that information, that data, we can have a more open conversation of what is student X actually doing and achieving?
It's one of the challenges, isn't it, of any of you guys teaching in international schools. Then it varies different in my experience by country. I know that in the UAE, where I've spent quite a lot of time, the demand for parents to get feedback and information has actually been one of the biggest obstacles towards digital learning in any form, because it's not a book that you send home, and there's a demand that there's something really physical that you send home. But the idea that you can actually then, as you say, James, you can say, well, that your child has spent like 2 minutes reading your science, or your child has spent 45 minutes, which is what we asked for, is really important. That data that you can then show how engaged they are, and actually also the data that where you see technology that can identify maybe they've spent 30 minutes doing a topic, but they haven't actually completed it. So you can see, well, they're not quite. They're reading it, but they're not taking it in. So there's a block to the learning. So there's all sorts of the time spent on a question or on a piece of reading can show you an awful lot. From they're perhaps flippant and they think they know the answer and they read through it quickly, or they've spent a long time on it but not completed it. All of those things are really helpful in terms of the engaging parents in their child's learning, I would imagine.
Also works different way, I think, with not just the slow readers, but I've got a few students who I can definitely think of this, and similar thing you were saying, with the answers right or wrong, and some of the ones we're using, there's only a few answers. They can probably skim read the page in about 60 seconds and just take a wild shot in the dark of can they get the answer right. And unfortunately, with some of the questions, it's pretty easy to be able to guess. It's just trial and error. So, okay, well, you've completed this page in 60 seconds. I'm fairly certain you've not read it. You've just scrolled to the bottom and guessed what the answer is and happened to got lucky. But because I can see that data, I can tell that was just a guess, not that you've actually really read it and understood it.
Some of the technology I've seen in different sectors actually is, and we probably would have all encountered this, but it's quite often the same technology that we see driving sort of educational adaptive learning, is the ability to not let those students go on until you can set a time. I haven't seen that necessarily come through in educational adaptive learning yet, but you can set that time so that you can't go, you have to spend 5 minutes reading. Of course, you've still got that issue that they might spend 5 minutes on the page, but not actually be reading it. But you can get that to the bottom of that with sort of the metacognition after the question, which is something that I think will become more and more common, that unconsciously competent or consciously incompetent is a term we don't like to use, but sort of I think I know the answer, but you get it wrong. That ability for the student to say how confident they were with it will, I think, identify some of those learners that you talk about who skim read and think they know the answer, and they will take wild guesses. But if they take 10 wild guesses, they're going to get quite a few wrong, but be very confident in their answer. So you'll be able to spot that trend, I suspect.
Yeah, that really helps. I worked with technology in the past, and it did have the function. You could click on the student's work, and then it told you, it logged all the activity that's happening. So if they went out of the screen, there was logged the student's name left the screen or whatsoever. So, and I really did find that helpful when I was giving feedback, or if I set them work, we were busy in class, I could see, okay, but he's not busy with what I assigned him to. He left the screen, or he's opened the browser on a different page or something like that. So that would definitely be something that would benefit the technology and the teachers as well. So even with disciplinary problems in schools, it's collective data that will transcend into a bigger picture. So
it gives you some clear, it gives you some clear, coherent evidence, doesn't it? Particularly if you know that a student is not really engaged with a particular subject, and you need the parents on board. And the parents are the parents are always going to have a rose-tinted view, or nearly always have a rose-tinted view of their children. And if you can actually say, look, we have the data here. We need your help to get them engaged. The data is so crucial in that, because otherwise parents won't believe.
Okay, we found with COVID, when we had some long periods of online learning, it was really useful we had a website, exactly what you're saying, Alex, where it could tell you if the student had gone off the website onto another website. When we were having to do teacher assessed grades, that was a really powerful tool, because we could say, well, the student have done this, but they've gone off the website. So for all I know, they could be going away and looking at the answers when we're trying to get assessment data. And being able to know that, are they actually, they've got the answer, but they have also flicked off the screen onto somewhere else 3 or 4 or 5 different times. Like, oh, they could just be on Google typing in, trying to look for the answer. Have they actually come up with the answer by themselves? And they've been on the screen the whole time? No, that's probably their own understanding, their own knowledge that's on there.
And just sort of flipping the perspective from the to the teacher's perspective now, do you feel the increased adoption of adaptive learning will enhance your own teaching methods and perhaps even overall job satisfaction? Even be great to hear your thoughts on that. Alex, do you want to kick that one off?
I think so, yes. It definitely makes some parts of teaching much easier. It streamlines it a little bit, just in terms of you know what it means. The kids understand the feedback, they know. So if there's a problem, they can go and have a look by themselves as well. So they don't have to wait for a teacher anymore, put up their hand, wait for the teacher, and then get feedback. We still want that, because it's the personalization of learning of one-on-one, when a teacher intervenes or helps with a concept. But it just, some of the students, the more advanced ones, I would say, or the lower ability students, when they get that immediate feedback, it just helps them with understanding. And so it buys you a little bit of time, and time is a very precious thing in education. So for that, I would say that it definitely is a tool that helps with job satisfaction. Yeah.
Mamahan, what about yourself?
Being into the education for a long time means I always looking for means how I can provide best education for all the students, and it was always a challenge. Even I go with the differentiated instructions and all those tasks were there, but which is I cannot go with the same pace every day, because of the so many challenges we all have. More than 100 students a day, I cannot remember all those things. But with this adaptive learning, I feel this is more of job satisfaction, and it helped me to come up with the different type of the teaching methods according to the different students, where the students have a different learning styles. I cannot go with one teaching style and say that all students have to go with this way. Where always it is a challenge in the past, but it is coming up into a new way. I can say that it is a new era is coming up, where we can talk about, okay, this is your learning style. I can talk with them who need more attention, who need more care is required, where sometimes we're only talking about subjects in the class, but no, subjects is the one thing, but sometimes they are coming with some different thoughts from the home. Their home background is different. So I can give need to go into the depth of some other things sometimes to help them, where I don't have the time before, but I can now spend some time on these issues. And it definitely helps where we have a personal connection with the child. They learn in a better way. And this is definitely is an addition or to give more support to each and every child, I can say.
I suppose the more a student is engaged and gives you that feedback that you can see they're developing and learning in their own way, the more satisfaction it will give you, right? It's yeah, I'm sure it has a huge impact. James, what about yourself?
I guess it goes back to the old classic argument of differentiation. How much can you spread yourself out across one classroom? As Man was saying, you can only do one thing really at a time in the classroom. Whilst if you're doing more personalized, sorry, there's a stopwatch beeping in the background. If you can, it gives you the opportunity of doing multiple things in one class. These guys over here are going to be focusing on this. You're going to be looking at X, Y, and Z. They're going to be doing questions on this. What's this side of the room might be because of what the personalized learning is leaning towards. It's going more on topic X or more towards this, or more higher level questions or lower level questions. To give you that more diversity within the classroom, you can actually probably achieve a little bit more because everyone can do the area that they need to work on, as opposed to just we are all going to do this one very specific thing, one very specific worksheet on this one very specific topic. It gives that a little bit more variety in the class. You can probably actually, everyone can be pushing forwards wherever the area is that they need to work on, which means hopefully you have to make less resources, less planning, not less planning, less prepping, but effectively less time before the lesson, which is a time's a valuable resource.
Interesting that whether or not it can, and we will hope it will definitely lead to that ability to properly differentiate within a classroom, because that's a challenge. I mean, in all of my experience of talking to teachers around the world for the last 20 years, differentiation, whether it's in a paper form as it used to be in a workbook, or using technology, has always been a challenge, because there's always been an understanding that you're not going to have 18, 20 or 35 kids in your classroom who are all learning at exactly the same speed at exactly the same level. That's never going to ever happen. And so if you're able to have a tool that teaches that keeps the faster learning students challenged and helps the slower learning children sort of understand the topic while you can guide that lesson from the front, that's I could see that would be very powerful.
It's not even some of the roadblocks I'm hitting. It's not even just fast and slow. It's language barrier is one of our biggest barriers. It's a huge one. I think you mentioned cognitive. We're using cognitive as well. One of the things we found with that one that's starting to get a little bit of traction is it being able to translate the words to any of the languages, and that's been a bit of a useful tool, as opposed to students just pulling out a dictionary, having to flick through. But the fact that they can just do it on the fly makes some questions much quicker and easier to access. But then if we could personalize that as well, so actually this is an easier question, not because it's an easy topic, but because it's easier accessible language, if it's an English speaking school for as ours is, it can help those students access the harder level stuff, but in our language that they might be able to understand.
It's a completely different subject. It's a completely different discussion, but it is one of the most fascinating things that anyone who's never taught or visited or been in an international school environment has got no concept of the amount of different languages that you guys have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and the percentage of them. The number of languages against the number of students is quite incredible. Because in a UK environment, when I talk to my colleagues and talk to teachers here, they struggle when they have sort of second language English learners with 2 or 3 different languages within the school, let alone sort of 30 or 40 or whatever. And that's quite interesting if technology can help with that. It's interesting that the higher word, the higher and more complex technical language, which I'm guessing actually is probably a bigger issue in science and maths than almost any other subject, certainly from my experience, it's a big barrier. You have very bright science, more mathematical minded kids who don't do so well in assessment because they struggle with the language, not because they struggle with the concepts. So it's quite interesting. But yeah, it was an eye-opener to me when I first went into international schools, just how many different languages people will be talking on any one day. And it's the challenge, because they go home. Your students will often go home and speak fluently in a completely different language at home. So it's not like they're practicing or they're speaking English throughout the day. They'll be speaking 2 or 3 maybe different languages. I have colleagues who work with the schools in the Benelux and in Brussels particularly. You'll have students who learn in English, talk to their best friends in French, go home and speak Dutch and German to their respective parents. So it's incredible skill to have, but it doesn't always enhance learning.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, and sort of moving on to the last question for today. Actually, sort of panning out, I suppose, and looking at a bit more sort of a macro global level, with regards to sort of equitable access to these personalized learning tools. What do you believe are some potential challenges with regards to these sort of ethical considerations when it comes to equitable access globally across different schools in different regions? Obviously, some regions are going to find it easier to adopt these tools. Others technology adoption might be trickier. So what are your thoughts on the future, or I mean current challenges that we have, and maybe how that could morph into sort of bigger future problems with regards to ethical and equitable access?
One in the long run could be if we're using these tools and they benefit some students, but then obviously these tools have a cost, and there are going to be some schools with more money than others. So I guess purely from a more ethical sort of consideration, you've got student X applying for university from one school with more money, can get these tools. School with less money might not be able to afford these tools. Obviously, one student clearly could clearly have a bigger advantage than another student, which is it because could that become almost a pay to win sort of way to get a head start in life?
What I think is it's important for us to regulate, not sure if that's the right word, but to make the children and the families understand that this is not an electronic teacher that you're busy with. This is just a tool that we use in education. This is not replacing the teacher as a whole. This is just a tool to enhance your learning, to give you feedback, to provide you understanding of where you are and where you are going. And another thing is, in my school, we have some of the students are on scholarships, so maybe the families aren't able to purchase the devices which provides access to these technologies. So that's another thing for just equity and providing everybody with the same possibility to access the learning at any given time or space.
I think having taught in China, kind of another side of that one as well, is it is certain websites, certain programs, are they accessible in all countries in the first place as well? So there were websites where I would assume it would be accessible, but it may have been based on Google without actually knowing it, which meant unfortunately we couldn't use it in China, for example.
An interesting one. Actually, online things that are reliant on online websites do struggle. In China, China's not the only place that is an issue, but it is obviously the major one because of so many things are based on Google compatibility, and that throws you out in China. I'm quite the question of equity is quite interesting to me because I think there was point was made that students might have a better advantage by having this in terms of going to university. I think it might not necessarily always be what we want, but I think there will always be competition in education, particularly that's always going to be the case. I think when I looked at the questions that Max had sent us around, one of the things that I'd written down, and I've just written down it again, is I think from the technology developer side of the content developer side of things, one of the key things is making sure that things are mobile optimized, because if you cannot view a program, if you cannot interact with the technology like this on a mobile device, you are immediately cutting out some of the people who won't necessarily be able to afford a laptop or something like that. But mobile phones people have, and it's amazing how much. When I've seen really good technology, quite a lot of my life I've traveled around in Africa, and they have their own distinct challenges to education. But one of the things that schools pick up on is that every student has a mobile because they use mobiles for so much else as well. And if you can make sure that your technology is not just viewable on mobiles, because most things that are web-based are, but actually optimized so that it's a good experience for the kids, I think that will help with that equity. It's an interesting challenge to make the most advanced technology equitable and sort of available for most people.
Yeah, and just another thing from a safeguarding perspective is the data collection of specific students and the storage of data, and for how long is it available, because for us we allow the students, they use the technology, it's diagnostic, it gives us pretty good feedback, but what happens behind it all, how is it processed, what feedback does it give these companies to further develop their their technology. So that's just a safeguarding concern for these kind of technologies.
It's a really good and valid point, and it's one that a lot of people don't necessarily think about or look about, but the collection and storage of data is so it is so important that whoever is collecting that data understands the rules that they have to abide by, and understands that data is not theirs. It's almost you're lent that data in order to facilitate the use of the product rather than keeping it for and storing it. It is quite interesting. I was involved in a what was supposed to be a 20-minute discussion on GDPR and data storage last week that ended up lasting 2 hours, because the understanding of from our perspective, the understanding even amongst ourselves about what people can and can't do is quite important. So safeguarding that data I think that will become quite important to schools. It is important now. It will become even more important to make sure that the safeguarding behind that data is in place and properly looked after. It's a fascinating thing. One of the things that I'd learned a few years ago is that the European Union's laws on data collection, which are quite stringent, if anyone's ever had to look at them, they are quite stringent. They apply to a school if a school has one student who was once resident in the EU. You don't even need to be a citizen, but if you have residency in the EU, you're covered by GDPR. Even if you're living in Thailand or in China, you're still covered by the same regulations. And not everyone who collects data understands that. I obviously clearly do because we've had that training, but it is quite important. The safeguarding of data will become, with technology, even more important than it is now.
It's nice points have come up. I was looking for the long term, and I'm looking into adaptive learning. It reaches to some level already, and the way and the pace it is integrating into the means around the world. I'm projecting that within the next 5 to 10 years, it will be all around the world. Adaptive learning will be there. What about after 20 years? 10 years, it will be everywhere, but where this is going to take us in the next 20 years? The students, those who are going to enter into the school now, they are going to pass in the next 20 years. Those who are at present in the school, they are also going to pass. So what would be the scenario? What would be the implications of all those things? How are we projecting that? We are projecting for a country about 50 years, where the country will go, where the teaching will go in this situation after 20 years. Will the parents in the situation of international online schooling is already started coming up? Where the students, now we are taking 20 in a class, if we have to cop up with the same type of the pace and with the same type of the means, maybe 40 students in the class, they say that teacher have to handle now 40 students because teacher is not directly involved. Teacher is just in place of just facilitating the learning. Teacher is just managing all those things. So this is some burning question which always in last I had a meeting, this group meeting, we had the AI meeting, and they are talking about, they are sharing so many tools that with words you can create a picture, with words you can means voice, you can come up with so many AI tools they are sharing. And they are sharing one of the idea that, okay, if your client is saying that you need this type of the means, this type of the painting is required, and they give some instructions, okay, this painting is coming. At present, it seems to be saving time, but after 5 years, when it is all around, why the client is going to someone, he gives the same instruction by his mouth, what he want. The businesses we are looking, it is going to take away many of the businesses, and many of the things are going. What type of the future? I have some discussion, but how you guys think about it here?
I think there's another roundtable discussion for you, Max, that could probably schedule about 4 hours if you.
I know, yeah.
There's a magic question of the one thing that I would almost guarantee is that the classroom of 20 years' time will be very, very different from the classroom of 20 years ago. Will be more different, sorry, from from today than today's is from 20 years ago. And in fact, I think the classroom of 5 years from now will be more different than a classroom today is from 20 years ago, because technology is developing so fast. There's a really lovely we don't have time to talk through it, and maybe we'll have another discussion at another time, but there is a really interesting move in terms of the providers of content and technology with what AI can do, because AI can generate content, but it has to have a base. What the combination of AI and adaptive technology can do to really further personalize students' learning journey. Now, I've been in some interesting discussions on that already, and they are way, way beyond my technical capacity to understand exactly the full benefit of this. But I know that 5% of the benefit of what I've heard will be coming in the next 2 or 3 years, and we are talking 2 or 3 years max. 5% of that benefit will be fantastic, will be really useful, as long as it's properly curated, properly regulated, and properly understood. The combination of that AI and adaptive technology is quite considerable. So I don't think you need to think about the classroom of 20 years. I think we need to think about what the classroom of 5 years is going to be like, because it's going to be very different, I think.
Very right, very right. Balance is required at this stage, which I can say means, yes, I agree with you, Rob, that in the next 5 years, we need to be very carefully balance all those things and need to integrate all those things which are coming up with a great balance here.
Maybe Max will circulate this discussion to us all in 5 years' time, and we can look back and go,
we'll have a look.
We didn't have half the idea of what really happened.
Maybe even the format of these discussions might be drastically different as well. So
absolutely.
It's a fascinating.
We'll no longer all have access to Zoom because there'll be a different technology, so we won't be able to watch it anyway.
Yeah, I'm sorry to take you to the 20 years. I have to just think about the 5 years. That will be a great time. Then we come up again with the new things.
All I can say is the way that ChatGPT and AI have changed the way of thinking with technology is some of my colleagues would laugh at me for thinking about 5 years in the future, because it will change quite quickly. And the thing for me is to make sure that however I'm involved in that, the outcome is beneficial rather than time consuming, because I've also in 20 years of working in education seen an awful lot of software development and technologies that have ended up with teachers having to spend more time rather than less time. And as Alex pointed out, there isn't much time. It's a very valuable commodity. So it's just about making sure that whatever happens contributes positively and takes less time.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the way that we as teachers use this technology says a lot about it as well. So I think if you're just going to rely on this technology to do your work for you, then you are kind of giving it the wrong approach to kind of replace yourself. But if we use it as, like I said previously, a tool in education, then there will still be a need for growth. We as humans adapt to different situations. So we will have to adapt with the technology, find new ways to use it, make it more efficient, and just crack on.
The other thing that's coming that's going to make it also a big change, which is why I think there's a lot of big change fairly short, is that I've always thought that the way that technology is used in the classrooms will grow and will improve, but there will be a step changing point in time when there are a large proportion of teachers and senior teachers who have grown up as digitally native, i.e. people who've grown up going to technology before written were like paper as their immediate sort of first port of call. The example I always give is I'm lucky with my family's got quite we have a few children and there's a bit of an age gap, so I've got children in their 20s who I would not consider digitally native. They grew up with technology, they understand technology, but they were first they didn't have phones when they were growing up. When they were smaller kids, they didn't they write things down rather than type them as an immediate sort of first go-to. And I have a 14-year-old daughter who doesn't write really. I probably should. She does, and she can. She's got very neat handwriting, but it's almost like her handwriting is art. It's something she makes sure is neat. But if she submitted her homework, her English homework, on her mobile phone, because it's easier for her to do her writing and composition on a mobile phone than it is for her to do it on a laptop or on a or write it down. And when people of her generation become teachers and senior teachers, the classroom will change, because they'd have grown up in a different digital environment. And that's going to be, I think, the other step change, along with fast-paced movement of AI and different technologies.
I mean, it's also the other side of it. Is I'm seeing it now. The students are, even now, they're picking up the technology quicker than even the most technology educated members of staff. And that technology is always going to be out there anyway. So if we're not using it in class, the students probably already are using it. Within, I think, a week of ChatGPT coming out, the kids were already using it in class, trying to get some answers out for it. So if we ourselves don't understand it and aren't using it, the students may be using it in a way that's not the best and beneficial for them, and therefore we've got to have an understanding of it to help guide them, direct them to use it in the best beneficial way that's actually going to grow and develop their understanding.
Technology discussions can go on for a very long time. I'm very aware that we've taken lots of people's time and probably gone beyond our time on this one, Max. But it is fascinating. It's a really fascinating subject.
It is indeed, and this, we're recording another roundtable actually in a couple of weeks' time on. I mean, it's a whole other topic, but it kind of leads on with regards to media literacy and media manipulation in class as well, and bringing in resources that are trusted from not only the student's perspective but also the teacher's perspective too. So how you can educate that. So yeah, there's so many tangents we can go on this, but I think unfortunately we've run out of our time today. But yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation. I'm sure we'll have many more, maybe even a part 2 with regards to you guys, getting more of your insights. So thank you once again for joining, and yeah, really appreciate you taking the time. Looking forward to more follow-up conversations on this topic.